we have been looking at data from the past symposia, the last 10 symposia that we have had. And there's quite a large collection of information about it. And the one thing that stands out is that the number of submissions to the symposium has gone up significantly, certainly over the last 20 years, but much more steeply over the last 10 years. And but then, the way we conduct the symposium, the format of the symposium restricts how many papers can actually be handled and presented. And so what has happened is that there is a significant rejection rate for the symposium. So in fact, last time there were over 1,700 submissions, and in the end, we could only have about 600 or so papers accommodated at the symposium. For a premium conference for an institute, I think that high level of rejection is not very productive. It's not a positive outcome, especially for people who want to present new ideas. So we analyze this problem, and then we need to have multiple solutions. It's not a single point of failure here. There are multiple things that need to be changed at the same time to make it more conducive for participation. And that's the format that we are going to talk about today. So this slide has an overview of what changes are to come. The first and perhaps the most significant step from an author perspective is the two-step review process. So we will now have a complete separation between symposium submission and acceptance and the journal, which is the Proceedings of the Combustion Institute, the submission to the journal and its acceptance. So they're connected, of course, but then the process is a two-step process. And I'll explain how this works very shortly. Based on this, we are able to make certain changes to the symposium. And one of them is the idea that the way we consume information has changed significantly over the last 10 years, and even more recently. And so the notion that everything has to be an oral presentation where we sit in a room and listen to speakers perhaps is not the most effective way to share information. So we want to make posters and poster presentation an important part of the symposium, if not equally important, even more important than oral presentations when it comes to certain kinds of talks. So we will vastly expand poster presentations. And this venue, it's a beautiful venue in Kyoto. It's able to accommodate quite a large number of this combined format, oral and poster presentations. So we can accommodate even up to 1,200 papers. Also, there is no need for this if the quality is not there, but we have the upper limit of about 1,200. So this allows us to vastly improve participation from wide variety of audience. Now, in addition to all of this, we are going to introduce what are called mini symposia inside this combustion symposium. In the initial version, we are planning for 4 mini symposia, and which will include different formats, different kind of structure, but topics that are of current interest to the combustion world that impact more than just a few. Though it will be a significant fraction of the attendees would be interested in each one of these mini symposia. And part of this would be invited talks, panel discussions, so that when we leave the symposium, all of us are energized about what's going to come 2 years later and what research that we can do. Like we go out with ideas. So that's the goal. In addition to all of this, there's also space for other kinds of sessions that could be organized by attendees, and we will have a separate information for that on how we are going to plan for those sessions. So the takeaway from this slide or from what I'm saying here is that we have changed the symposium in multiple ways to ensure that there's more participation and more sustained participation at the symposium itself. So that's the main goal. Hai pointed this out that there is a need for change overall. And one of the things I do want to point out is that, when I've been submitting to the Combustion Symposium for a long time now, about 22 years at this stage. And it's always a stressful process. We spend a lot of time writing papers, and then we get back reviews, and often these reviews are not consistent with how we have written the paper or what we think, and so on. And most of the reason being that it's a very compressed format for a review that makes it difficult to have, any kind of, um, you know, discussion between the reviewers and the authors, and some kind of feedback that's more productive. What it also does is tells us that only certain kinds of papers are suitable for this kind of compressed review process. And so we tend to write papers that are, I don't want to say not innovative, but less cutting edge, because we are somehow trying to figure out if the reviewers will pay attention to the details in this short time and so on. So we want to somehow remove that process. We want ideas that are fresh and new, and perhaps not fully formed yet to the point that where they can be published as a 20-page paper, still be presented at the symposium. And that's sort of important here. This encouraging innovative research is part of what we want to achieve here. Um, we also heard a number of comments from early career researchers where they said that their work has not received the same attention, either in terms of being presented as oral presentations or even selected for the symposium. And so we want to take all of these stakeholders' concerns before we decide changes. So that's part of how we came to this end process. So this is the crux of what we are planning to do. We have separated the symposium selection from the journal publication. Now, if this does not come as a surprise move, because if you have been following the meetings around the world, including the recent ASPEC meeting and the US meeting before that, this two-step process is already to some extent being implemented. And the idea being that there will be a selection process for the symposium, and then there's a separate proceedings review process. And the symposium selection process works this way. Authors are going to submit a 4-page paper. I want to be very clear here. This is a paper, not an abstract. So it should include completed work that has not been presented at other meetings that have not been yet published or sent for review to journals. Only these articles will be considered. And those 4-page papers will have a specified format. We are finalizing the format. You will have access to these documents very soon. And once you have this 4-page paper, that goes to an expanded colloquium review team. And I'll come to the different colloquia very soon. But each colloquium has a lead colloquium coordinator who is a senior experienced researcher. They have participated in many symposia. They understand the scope of symposium, and they're reviewers for different journals. If not, they're editors of different journals. So the lead colloquium coordinator under that person is a set of colloquium co-coordinators, and they are responsible for the entire evaluation process. And I want to be clear here, this is an evaluation, not a review process. So there is no feedback to authors and a second version of the papers. We are only evaluating what is submitted. The colloquium co-coordinators together will be responsible for all evaluations. We are not going to send papers out for review externally. Everything is going to be done within this colloquium review team. And this colloquium review team has been expanded. Typically, the size of this team is about 80 to 90 researchers. This time, we are planning about 200 colloquium co-coordinators and LCCs who will handle this work. And each CCC, our estimation is going to look at about 20 to 25 papers, 4-page papers, and they are going to come to a decision based on certain metrics that have been provided. And those metrics will also be released to the authors, and we will tell you what our evaluation criterion is. But you should think of the intent of this 4-page paper is to tell the evaluation team, the colloquium review team, the need for that work to be presented at the symposium. So we should think of it that way rather than a review process per se. So in some sense, you have to convince the evaluation team about originality and novelty and relevance and how it's different from the other recent work and so on. So in many senses, it's similar to how we write papers, but it's in a more condensed form in a way to ensure that the evaluation team understands the value of the work that's going to be presented. So each paper will be evaluated by two CCCs, and they will provide comments, which will at the end be shared with the authors. And these comments will lead to a decision. Each CCC will have a decision, select or reject, and also a poster or oral presentation. And if two CCCs have opposite views, then the LCC will provide the tie-breaking evaluation by looking at the evaluation of the CCCs, perhaps having a small discussion to understand the differences and to come to a conclusion on this. So the LCCs and CCCs will then provide summary ranking of the papers within their colloquia and the suggested presentation formats, and this will be sent to the program co-chairs. I'll come to these presentation formats in a second, but in general, the authors will provide their preference for the presentation format, whether it's oral or poster, and our intention is to follow that prescription. We are not going to change your preference if we can avoid it. What we have found from the past symposia is that authors know what is the best medium to present their work, and so we want to respect that. Sometimes, just to accommodate the papers, we may have to make a few changes, but we expect those changes to be quite marginal, not a huge change of your presentation preferences. Now, once these selections are made, the authors whose papers have been selected will be invited to submit a full-length paper for review in the Proceedings of the Combustion Institute. I want to make 2 points here. First, there is no necessity for the 4-page paper to be expanded to 8-page paper and to be submitted to the proceedings at all. So you can decide once the selection letter is sent to you that you're not interested in submitting the full-length paper, and you're only going to attend the symposium and make the presentation oral or poster, and that's acceptable. There's no need to do that at all. The second point I want to make is that if you do choose not to submit a paper, there is some form of penalty with it, in the sense that only the full-length papers will be considered for the Distinguished Paper Award and hence the silver medal of the Combustion Institute for this symposium. So if you don't submit a full-length 8-page paper for review to the proceedings, then you will not be considered for that evaluation process. So you just have to be aware of that. Now, once the invitation letters are sent, then the process is taken over by the Proceedings of the Combustion Institute editors, and all three of them are here, Michael, Faye, and Deanna. So Michael, since you went yesterday, do you want to start the process by explaining how the Proceedings editors will take over from here?
Sure. So thanks, Venkat. So as Venkat mentioned, once the decisions are made on the symposium presentations, those authors will be invited to expand their 4-page papers into a full-length 8-page paper that they can submit to the Proceedings of the Combustion Institute if they so wish. And so just a couple of things to mention. This is a very different process than before because one, we will not have previously reviewed the full-length 8-page papers, and we do anticipate, because of the greater number of submissions and presentations at the symposium, there could be a far larger number of papers that come to the proceedings. So to accommodate that increased workload, one of the things that we will do is, in addition to the permanent associate editors of the proceedings, a set of the LCCs and some of the CCCs CCCs will also be invited to serve as guest associate editors for the proceedings for that cycle, just to help ensure that every paper gets looked at very carefully without any rush in it all. Now, as I mentioned, unlike prior symposia, we will not have reviews that just carry over from the symposium evaluation process. We won't actually use that written information at all. That's just for the symposium process. Some of the people will be involved who saw the 4-page papers, but the 8-page papers will not have been reviewed. And so once authors who wish to submit their 8-page papers to the proceedings, they will be reviewed essentially as any standard review process for any other journal, for example, Combustion and Flame or other Combustion Institute journals. So the papers will be sent out to reviewers. Those reviewers will provide comments, rebuttal and revision, revised manuscript, and so forth, as we do with the traditional journal. We will rely on the CCCs, who are not guest editors, to help carry a burden of this review process because they will have seen and be familiar with these papers. But we will also rely, as we normally do, on a large pool of our community as external reviewers for these papers there. So this review process will look very similar, like I said, to Combustion and Flame. For those of you who have been reviewers on the off-year proceedings papers associated with the U.S. National Combustion Meeting or the European Combustion Meeting, you've essentially seen the review template that we'll be using there. So the idea here is that it's kind of twofold. One is there's a challenge because there will be a far greater workload for the proceedings editorial team, but it's also an opportunity because of the way the process will now work. We can look at every paper very carefully. We're not tied to the venue accommodation that sets the number of papers. Every paper that's submitted to the proceedings will be evaluated on its own merit, and there's no essentially limitation to the papers that can go into the proceedings. We don't anticipate that all papers submitted will ultimately be accepted. That's the nature of a journal review, but every paper gets its own independent evaluation, and its publication decision will be based on its merits entirely.
Thanks, Michael. Faye, Deanna, did you have anything else to add?
No.
No, I think it's summarizing very well what we plan for the next symposium.
Thank you. I think this, this close coordination between the proceedings and the symposia is very important to make this work. So I'm very glad that the proceedings team is right here. I do want to make one comment to what Michael said. Although the review process is completely separate and will start anew, the symposium evaluators will provide some comments about the papers, and that can be used to improve or when you expand to 8 pages, you can use it for improvement. And some of these CCCs will also serve as reviewers for the full paper. So, taking their comments into consideration when you expand it might be beneficial. So it's just a suggestion to authors. So I want to keep that here. Now, I do want to point out, there's a Q&A here, and then you can start adding questions to it. And then after I'm done with the presentation, we'll go through the questions. So you can keep adding to it, and then we can take a look at that as well. I'm presenting here the timeline for this whole process. And the entire thing starts now with the 4-page paper submission on 12th November of 2025. Which is a little earlier than what we typically have for the symposium. It's typically in the first week of December. It has moved around quite a bit over the last 20 years, but this is where we are right now. So now it's a little bit earlier. It's 12th November 2025. And the submission will be through the Microsoft CMT website. And all instructions, formats, everything will be provided to the authors very soon. We are working on finalizing them. So by the end of the month, we should have everything in line for all of you. Once it comes to us, all these papers will go through an initial check, just like any journal. And then whatever we find, all the papers we find relevant will be given to the LCCs, who will then give it out to the CCCs for evaluation. And the colloquium teams have to provide back all the reviews and their summary rankings somewhere between the 11th and the 25th of January. So we will go through each colloquium one by one, work with the LCCs and CCCs to make sure that we have the best selection of papers from their submissions. The notification of selection or rejection to the symposium will be sent by 1st February 2026. And the selection of whether it's a poster or an oral presentation, that will be done about 15 days later. We do need some time to make sure that everything can be fit in the right schedule. So that explains the delay between the two times. Now, once the authors are notified on February 1, you can start, if you decide to submit to the proceedings a full-length paper, you can start expanding your 4-page paper into the full-length paper for submission by 15th of March. And that submission will happen on the Elsevier website, just like every other symposium. And then it'll be taken over by the proceedings editors who will then distribute it to guest associate editors and also to the reviewers. And that process then goes on separately. And depending on the outcome for that will be dependent on the review. So, just like any other journal, a majority of the reviewers will have to be positive. There will be a rebuttal process, and then the authors can make modifications and so on. So we expect that process to continue for up to 8 weeks, at which point some decision will be made on those papers. And based on those decisions, they can now be published in the proceedings. So our hope is that a majority of the papers will be published in the proceedings and online by the start of the symposium. If not, most of the process will be finished by September of 2026. In addition to all of this, and I want to be very clear here, the submission for both oral and poster presentation is on 12th November 2025. So this is when all submissions go out. They're not two separate submission days, just one day when it is submitted. We do have the work in progress poster sessions, and that submission will happen towards the end of April. So yesterday I was thinking it's more towards the beginning of April. Consulting previous symposia, it looks like it towards the end of April. So that is a separate process. Work in progress poster submissions do not have a path to the proceedings at all. They will have a separate session at the symposium where they will present the work. You'll be asked to submit 1 or 2 page abstract for that. And based on those abstracts, there's a WIPP evaluation team that's been put in place, and they will decide who will present and what time they will present and things of that nature. So the WIPP submission and process is completely separate from everything else I've talked about right now. Now, once these 4-page papers have been accepted and sent on February 1, authors have to make a choice whether to submit the full-length paper or not submit the full-length paper. So that's their choice. Regardless, a final program and a book of abstracts, when I say book of abstracts, I mean these 4-page papers, all compiled into one PDF document or a set of non-DOI document will be provided to all attendees. So it's not an archival publication. So it's not subject to the restrictions of an archival publication. It is only given to the attendees as a way to help them go through some of the material before they come to the meeting and so on. We will also have, in addition to this, we will require all authors to make a short presentation. I say short, a minimum of 5 minutes. It can go even up to 15 minutes if you want to have your whole presentation recorded. You will be required to submit this sometime by the middle of June. And we will collect all the recordings, whether for oral or for poster, and those will be made available to the attendees before they come to the symposium. So at the symposium, we'll have multiple ways of interaction with the presenters and with the audience. So you will have the oral presentations where attendees can listen to what you have to say. You'll have the poster presentations, which is more interactive, and we encourage everyone to go see these posters, and we have dedicated times only for these poster sessions, no other concurrent sessions. And we will also have these recordings and the book of abstracts. So information about all of this is available to everyone, so we can have more engaging meeting when we actually come to Kyoto. So this is the overall timeline that I have. I do want to point out that we do have some changes to the colloquia structure to keep in mind. We still have 13 colloquia, but they are now divided into these three thematic areas: fundamental processes, enabling models, methods, tools and technology, and applications. So when you submit your paper, you will have to choose a primary colloquium. So you'll choose from these orange boxes on the right, one of the 13 colloquia. If you feel that your paper does not fit into any of the colloquia, very clearly, you can provide a second colloquium, and then, of course, when the papers come to us, all the PCCs and the LCCs will evaluate whether each paper belongs to their colloquium or it needs to be moved. This is a routine procedure we do for every symposium anyways, but here we want to give the option for the authors to provide a second colloquium in case they are not sure where this paper should sit. Now, the call for papers has description of each colloquium and what it contains. So these are this for the theme 1, and you're saying for theme 2 and for theme 3. So you should decide based on what is the focus of your 4-page paper, which colloquium it needs to go into. Yeah, so that's sort of critical.